Go ahead and stop me if you've heard this one before. A new game is announced, either a new IP or a return to an existing franchise that you once loved, and you eagerly click on the trailer to learn more about what type of gameplay experience the game is going to offer. Find out more about the characters, or even the world the game takes place in. But instead of talking about the gameplay systems, narrative intent, or world building, the video is filled with developers using buzzwords like modern gaming audience or current day sensibilities. They're not telling you so much about the game experience that they've created as they are telling you who they want to sell it to and why. Now, for years, publishers and developers alike have been pushing the narrative that the gaming landscape has completely changed, and a hobby that was in the past dominated by straight white men is now primarily made up of minority groups, and that games are, quote, no longer for you if you just want to go back to the days of good games instead of DEI checkboxes. So today we're going to be taking a look at how the modern audience narrative is a lie, and one that's built on deliberately misrepresented data. As of today, the best breakdown of gamer demographics that exists publicly is the ESA's 2025 Essential Facts Report. Now, there's a lot of information here that isn't entirely relevant to the topic of this video, so I'm only going to be focusing on the pieces that are, mainly the demographic pieces. But I will link it in the description for anyone who's interested in learning more about what the average gamer looks like today, as well as anyone who's just interested in fact-checking the data that I put on screen. After all, I am always talking about how you shouldn't just blindly follow journalists or influencers, and I don't think I'm any exception to that rule. So feel free to cross-reference and fact-check this entire video, and who knows, maybe I'll get something wrong and you can let me know in the comments below. But according to the report, more than 205 million Americans report playing video games for at least 1 hour a week. When we look at the gender breakdown, it's pretty close to an even split, with 47% of gamers being women and 52% being men, and non-binary players representing less than 1% of total gamers in the US. This gender breakdown is really important because it's often touted as proof to developers and publishers they need to pivot their games to target more diverse audiences. What they typically don't address here, though, is the platform breakdown, which shows that men still significantly outnumber women in both console and PC spaces. 51% of male gamers reported that they play on PC, compared to just 38% of women. Similarly, 55% of male gamers said they play on a console, compared to, again, 38% of women. In fact, the only area where women came close to or outnumbered men is in mobile, where 77% of men and 86% of women reported playing. This is an important clarification because it shows that just over a third of female gamers actually play on console or PC, and the majority of them are playing on mobile. Men are still the supermajority of the player base everywhere else, and despite publishers' best efforts, they've not been able to pull women away from their mobile games and get that to translate over into console and PC spaces. And considering that that's where most AAA games release, then it really explains the disconnect between the data about gamers supposedly being evenly split between men and women and the actual sales data we see for games that heavily pursue a modern audience. Despite all of that, however, I do think there's still an argument to be made about women representing a significant portion of gamers, and I personally am not saying that they should be ignored by any means. All I think that this means is that we need to be more honest about where different groups of gamers are playing and build games accordingly. It's absolutely okay for men and women to have different preferences when it comes to games, and pretending like they don't has really only harmed our industry by causing games to flop when they expected a massive influx of female players, only to find that that didn't translate from the mobile numbers that they were seeing. The reality is there is just not a lot of crossover between casual mobile gaming and more hardcore PC/console enthusiasts. Generally, people fall into one or the other, and trying to get mobile gamers to switch or vice versa doesn't really work long term. When it comes to racial demographics, however, those are far less even. 75% of adult US gamers are white, while Hispanics represented about 20%. Black or African American gamers represented 15%, with the two smallest groups being Native Americans and Asians at 3% each. This data shows a significant divide with the current narrative in game development that white gamers are no longer the majority. While they would love for you to believe that, it actually couldn't be further from the truth. And it seems that despite all of their efforts to create more diverse characters and protagonists, it just hasn't translated into huge spikes of minority players. Perhaps the biggest split though is with LGBT players, who make up just 9% of gamers in the US. And that leads me to the most interesting aspect of this data, which to me is the notable overrepresentation of minority groups within game development and games journalism. As we just established, fewer than 9% of gamers identify as LGBT, and less than 1% identify as non-binary or a gender that's not just male or female. In game development, however, GDC surveys show that a quarter of game devs identify as LGBT. When you narrow that age range of game devs to 18 to 24-year-olds, that number becomes a staggering 43%. And just take one look at the average writer for GameSpot or The Gamer, and you'll quickly see that this also translates over to games journalists. So really what we have here is a games industry media complex almost entirely made up of outliers. The people making games and reviewing them are not the same as the people who are actually buying them, which leads to a massive disconnect between what studios put out and what people actually want or play. So why is that an issue? Well, let me be clear. I and many others don't have a problem with people who look differently than us making or even playing games. In fact, despite what you might believe or what some commenters might say, I actually welcome it. What I do have an issue with is the industry's tendency to deliberately disrespect and devalue its primary audience, and the blatant anti-male, anti-white sentiment that is publicly praised in the industry. You have several studios that have bragged about having a no whites hiring policy, and countless journalists saying that developers should stop making games for straight white men, trying to pretend like they don't still make up a massive supermajority of the people who actually spend money on new video games. When game developers are telling these people not to buy their games and saying things like gamers don't have to be your audience, then crying on Blue Sky or Twitter about layoffs because their game didn't sell well and their review outlet or studio got shut down, it's kind of hard to feel bad for them, because what they've created is an industry where the minority of players make up the majority of developers and reviewers. So you have people who make games but don't actually represent the average player, and they send that off to their reviewer friends who are part of the same minority group, and then they pat each other on the back and tell each other what a great job they did, but then when it actually hits the market, it flops because their toxic positivity echo chamber doesn't actually represent reality. Again, for all the angry commenters out there, this isn't me saying that people who don't look like me don't belong in the games industry. It's me saying that certain people in the industry have created this false reality in which they are the majority, and so they make games that appeal to nothing but the bottom 9% of customers, which is why we get so many dead games and commercial flops. At the end of the day, I'm someone who loves video games. Despite the state of the industry today, I really want it to thrive and bring in people of different backgrounds to create and play blockbuster games that everybody loves. But I think in order to do that, developers, journalists, and even gamers need to start being honest about what the industry actually looks like. You can't keep making games for an echo chamber that represents the bottom 9% of customers and expect that to be a sustainable model for the industry. And until publishers actually tune into what their customers are actually asking for, they're going to continue to struggle through layoffs, poor sales, game cancellations, and studio shutdowns. That was definitely a lot of numbers though. Like I said, I'll be linking both the ESA report and the GDC report in the description so you can cross-reference it if you're interested. Now I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about the current state of the games industry and these demographics that I shared? Let me know down in the comments below. I'm sure they will be completely civilized and non-toxic. And as always, if you enjoyed the content and want to see more from me, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And also, let me know what other topics or games you'd like to see me cover. I'm always on the hunt for new video ideas, so definitely leave your recommendations below for me, and I will definitely consider them. With all of that said though, I will see you in the next video, so take care guys.